I tried to think about what patterns about conspiracy theories do I personally know during my lifetime. And I found out that there were quite a bit events that generated this phenomenon in Romania. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So as you might remember, in Romania in December 89, a revolution took place to bring down the dictatorship of Nicolae Ceausescu. Then he and his wife were executed, and the revolution took place in a period of severe austerity for Romanians because Ceausescu dreamed of transforming Romania in an autocracy. The consequences then were that the communist regime was changed, but members of the old Communist Party maintained their power. They were called young wolves. I personally remember conspiracy theories then, and they were not so different from the conspiracy theories now, that the world powerful leaders gained something for orchestrating the revolution, that Ceausescu was not dead, that the West is trying to own, buy, or it is trying to render us poor. Then in October 2015, something happened in Bucharest, a big fire in a nightclub where a concert took place and resulted in 64 deaths and 186 people injured. The conspiracy theories then were that it might have been a demonic act or an intentional act, or that the real number of deaths was withheld. And in that general state of mind of suspicion, a lot of investigations within the press took place, and they uncovered real irregularities within the medical system. And after that, the people protested, almost 50,000 people protested in the front of the Romanian government. And what was called within the press the collective revolution brought protests demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister Victor Ponta and others. And as a result of that, the technocrat government followed. So in February 2020, the first case of coronavirus was reported in Romania as well. In March, as you all know, the World Health Organization declared this a pandemic, and then the government in Romania declared a national emergency state and a total lockdown of 60 days after that. A state of national alert is still ongoing now in Romania. It will gonna end on Monday, the 8th. But now still ongoing with mandatory masks and several restrictions still in place. So me and my colleagues and my team was very curious about what psychological changes take place within the debut of the pandemic. And the first line we thought were to evaluate or to assess the medical doctors and the medical staff. So we did that, and we published this article with the data we found. We had 364 respondents from Timiș County, and we discovered that 50% of the respondents were slightly depressed, and almost 30% reported anxiety, with higher scores on both scales regarding the people that were working in the front lines or red area in Romania. I remind people with this data, we are talking about April, May 2020, and it would be very interesting to see what consequences from then until now what changes in these numbers took place. What we saw was the main resilience factor within the data we collected was the professional support, and people really relied on that to lower anxiety and stress levels and to heighten resilience, and as a result to that to heighten empathy towards patients. So lacking professional support will affect not only the team but also the patients as an end result. So you see there the slide that professional support was acting upon empathy throughout two different pathways throughout burnout depersonalization or in a direct way. So identifying what vulnerable group to the lack of empathy while experiencing lack of professional support, we found that young people were at a higher risk, and that people that were in coordinating position, they were self-select as being more resilient to both levels of empathy, resilience, and lower levels of anxiety and depression. So we were really glad to bring COMET-G in Romania and to see what happens within the general population here. We collected data between June and December 2020, and we gathered 1,446 adults with a mean age of 47 years old, mostly female in our group. So I'm gonna just dive in to the conspiracy theories data that we have found, and I was quite surprised, and I redid these numbers a lot because all participants in our study believed at least a little bit in one or more of the conspiracy theories, while only 60% accepted the possibility of the virus appearing by accident, and only 8% believed this very much. So I just felt sort of scientific relief that the government published some data that is quite similar to what I'm presenting here, and it confirms the level of conspiracy theories believed within the general population that we found in COMET-G data. So I'm going to talk about the role of the religious cult, because I think it's a big role when talking about the communities, and we know that the population in Romania is the most religious population in Europe, and that most of our population is Orthodox Christian. Including myself, and that the Orthodox Church was very reluctant to offer a firm position within the pandemic and regarding the measures and supporting the government with restriction to protect the population, but it did have very preeminent preeminent figures within the church that were very willing to go publicly and proclaim these conspiracy theories of and proclaim the lack of vaccination, and they were very slow in responding to this kind of situation. Also, the infodemia did not help either. And it was quite a struggle between having proper information and having too much information and having misleading and misinforming data. While I think you know it in a personal way as well as I know it, especially during the first phase of the pandemic. I summarized our results in Romania with this image with the KMG study. It seems very complicated, but I'm not going to give a lot of details. This is part of an article that's currently under review, and I'm just going to talk about what we call the reality reading patterns. And we define those by the religious increase, conspiracy theories, and internet use. And if you look closely to all the psychological changes and disturbances that we assessed, you will see that these reality reading patterns are sort of isolated from the rest within our sample. From the rest, they do have a small or an indirect influence over the psychopathology, but not as important, or they seem to be sort of something else and not something directly related to depression, anxiety, or suicidality. The consequences were quite obvious for Romanian population, and here is very recent sort of classification or top within the European countries with the vaccination. You can see Romania right down next to the last country from Europe with the complete vaccination rates. But we are on top, unfortunately, with the deaths worldwide per million population. Before I end my presentation, I would like to leave you with this quote from a very dear book that I think everybody should read. And I'm going to say that maybe when we try to find direct and very concrete data and about conspiracy theories, maybe we should talk about the conflict between the will to deny horrible events and the will to proclaim them out loud. That it's clearly the central dialectic of psychological trauma. And I think we can talk about trauma in our current context worldwide with the pandemic and something else following. So thank you very much.